but I found the technique of it so distancing
Totally.
that I couldn't stop thinking about the technique. Documentary filmmaker RaMell Ross makes his narrative debut with Nickel Boys. This is a film that is already sweeping up critics awards and getting some big nominations, and it's now hitting theaters.
There is lots of love in the world among our fellow critics for this movie. We may not feel the same way. I'll speak for myself. I may not feel the same way, but I love the ambition and I love the big swing of it. So come hang out with us here at Breakfast All Day, because this is definitely the kind of movie that we will always want to talk about here. If it's in the awards conversation, if it's pushing things artistically, we love talking about that kind of film. So please come and hang out with us while we do that.
I let you down. I'm okay. Yeah. Hell, I let you down. No.
So this film takes place in the 1960s in Florida in the beginning, and we don't really know who it's about at first because we're seeing it through the main character's eyes. He's a little boy at first. He's black. He's living in Florida in the 1960s. But we don't really see him for a while. And that is the big structural, ambitious swing that RaMell Ross is taking here, showing us the world through his eyes and how he is being perceived by others. And so we see things that a little kid would see, like he's laying in a field of grass, or he's like eye level at the table when his mom and dad have friends over to play poker and drink and smoke, or
looking up at the oranges in a tree,
or Christmas and his mom is dumping tinsel down on him, or whatever it is. And so it's a very inspired and clever conceit for a while. And then eventually he has promise and he's going to go off to school to get an education and, flee the trappings of his life as a young black kid in the South. He makes a decision that puts him in a bad spot, and he ends up at this reform school where the people who live there are known as Nickel Boys, which gives the film its title. But throughout all of this, we are still seeing the world through his eyes. We don't know what he looks like. Here and there we get glimpses. There's one in particular that took my breath away, where when he's really little and his mom is ironing and like passing this metal iron across a board, and he sees his own reflection in it. And that I thought was incredibly clever. Or he's looking at a bunch of televisions in a window, and we see his reflection in a kind of shimmery way.
And the televisions is, Martin Luther King is speaking.
Right.
Yeah.
That's important too. So the kid's name is Elwood, and he goes to this school where it is segregated. It's illegally segregated, but clearly the white kids who are there, the white juvenile delinquents who are there, are separated from the black kids who are there, and the black kids are forced to do all kinds of labor. It's essentially slavery in a lot of ways. So he becomes friends with another kid named Turner, and it's how they experience the world. But then there are also these flash forwards, and it's intentionally kind of disorienting, and it's intentionally a puzzle, and it all comes together eventually. And I found this whole approach so distancing, partly because it gave me a headache and made me nauseous. Like all that first, because there's a lot of like looking around, and it's how I felt when I watched Hardcore Henry as well.
Yeah, I've heard this described as the art house Hardcore Henry. And it also goes back to like an old noir film called The Lady in the Lake, where Philip Marlowe is the camera, and unless he's standing in front of a mirror, like you never see him, you just hear him, and you just see everything from his POV. But I agree with you, and we saw this separately and didn't really talk about it. I have nothing but respect for everything this movie's going for. It's based on the novel by Colson Whitehead. But I found the technique of it so distancing.
Totally.
That I couldn't stop thinking about the technique. I kept thinking about, where's the camera? Is he wearing a GoPro? Like, what is happening here? And I never stepped back from it enough to be like, oh, and there's a story and there are characters and things are unfolding here, because all I kept thinking about was how this movie was being made, and it stood in the way of my just seeing and feeling the movie. We're in the minority. People are digging this movie. They're loving the cinematography. Like, everyone is raving about it. So, I mean, like, take us with a grain of salt on this one, because we are outliers. I'm a fan of RaMell Ross's earlier work. I saw his documentary Hell County this evening. I think it's beautiful. And I have nothing but respect for the craft here. But the choices that he makes, while many people are responding to them favorably and are moved by his choices, got in my way.
Yeah, I had to look away quite often because it was giving me such a headache because I'm like, oh, I just cannot do this for a second. I need to like reset my brain for a second. I also can't read in the car. So it's me. It's like a motion sickness thing for me. And so again, grain of salt, maybe if that bothers you, FYI, that's what this entire movie is.
Yeah.
It also makes a decision. The director makes a decision about halfway through that I don't think totally works, and it kind of breaks the spell of what he had achieved until then.
There's a really long essay in the New Yorker talking about these choices and what they mean and how they fit into a larger context of sort of images of Black bodies and about Black perspectives in art and in filmmaking. And it's the kind of thing where I read it and I was like, okay, that makes sense. I see what you're saying, but that didn't help me in the act of watching it. So maybe do the homework first and know what you're getting in for, and then also sit in the back row just in case this it's a little too Cloverfield for you, you know, and you get motion sickness. Again, I honor what they're doing here, and I'm glad that people are loving it, and I respect the fact that, you know, MGM Amazon is releasing this movie, which is like, you know, pretty experimental by sort of major studio standards. I just wish that it had worked for me.
Yeah. I'm thankful that Aunjanue Ellis-Taylor is there.
Yeah.
Because she brings humanity and warmth to it, where it helps kind of fill in that detached feeling that I think we're experiencing. And also what these boys experience is harrowing, a lot of it, and they don't hold back on that. And we see the abuse and we hear it even more effectively, and it's chilling. So her presence is necessary in terms of being a source of warmth. But then again, it jumps in time in ways that are disorienting and I think break the momentum of the narrative. And it makes sense eventually who this person is and why we are seeing him.
Yes. Yeah, no,
in the moment, though, I'm like, why?
It does answer all of its own questions, you know, whether it's about, you know, another narrator, whether it's about, like, we understand that some of what we're seeing is people researching what actually happened at this institution at that time, much later. And so I found all of that interesting once it all kind of came together, but it didn't keep this from feeling to me like this sort of aesthetic exercise that prevented me from having a more emotional response.
Okay. Well, what's your number then on Nickel Boys?
I'm going to say a 7, just because I think the craft is impressive. And there are a lot of, you know, so many things in here that I like, but I think I would have had I been on board for all of it, and had I not felt like I was being excluded from it by, you know, emotionally excluded from it by its aesthetic choices, I'd have been much higher.
I will say a 6.5 because I'm with you in appreciating the attempt. We talk about this all the time. I love a big swing, you know, and I appreciate the vision of it and the ambition of it. It just didn't work for me personally, but maybe it will for you. So if you go see Nickel Boys, please come back and let us know how you liked it. Did you bring a barf bag with you in case you were feeling motion sickness like I did? But hope you enjoy it and let us know.